All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into some pretty choppy waters, geopolitically speaking.
Yeah.
Imagine, being able to sit down with both Putin and Zelensky, these two leaders locked in this bitter conflict, and just tell them straight up, war isn't the answer.
Wow.
Well, that's kind of what India's Prime Minister Modi did.
Yeah.
And his message is making some waves.
It's fascinating, isn't it? The Russia-Ukraine war, it's been raging for over a year now.
Yeah.
Devastating consequences for everyone involved.
Yeah.
And here's Modi, a leader with, strong ties to both sides stepping up and calling for peace.
And he didn't just, go through the usual diplomatic channels.
Right.
He chose a really interesting platform
Yeah.
to deliver this message, the Lex Fridman Podcast.
Right. It's a show known for these deep intellectual conversations, right? And it attracts a global audience, especially those who are interested in technology and ideas. It's almost like Modi was bypassing the traditional power brokers and speaking directly to, a new generation of influencers.
Okay, so what exactly did he say? Give me the rundown.
Well, his core message was very clear. Military victory is a mirage.
Okay.
No matter how many weapons are supplied, no matter how many battles are won, true resolution can only come from dialogue.
So he basically said, look, you guys can keep fighting.
Yeah.
But it's not going to solve anything. You need to sit down and talk.
Exactly. And he emphasized that this isn't just about Russia and Ukraine.
Right.
The war is having this ripple effect across the globe,
Yeah.
particularly in the global south where food, fuel, and fertilizer prices are skyrocketing.
That's a point we often overlook, right?
Yeah.
We tend to focus on the military and political aspects, but this war is impacting the daily lives of millions of people far beyond the battlefield.
Think about it. The fertilizer crisis alone is a huge deal.
Mm.
Fertilizer prices directly impact food production,
Right.
which then drives up food costs for everyone. It's this chain reaction with global consequences.
Okay, so we have this devastating war that's reached kind of a stalemate.
Yeah.
No clear winner in sight. And it's causing pain and instability all over the world.
Yeah.
And into this mess steps Modi calling for peace and dialogue.
It's a bold move, especially considering the current state of affairs.
Yeah.
Both sides have dug in their heels. We've seen glimpses of hope with, ceasefire attempts.
Right.
But then Putin throws in these conditions for ending the fighting.
Yeah, like demanding Ukraine promise never to join NATO.
Right.
And that Russia gets to keep all the territory it's claimed.
Yeah.
Those are pretty non-starters, right?
Exactly. They're widely seen as unrealistic and unacceptable to Ukraine and its allies.
Yeah.
So we're kind of stuck in this tragic loop of violence and mistrust.
Which makes Modi's intervention even more intriguing.
Yeah.
He's not just some neutral observer.
Right.
He has close relationships with both Putin and Zelensky.
Exactly.
Could he actually be the one to break the deadlock?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
He's certainly in a unique position to act as a mediator.
Yeah.
Someone who can bridge the gap and facilitate communication.
Right.
But the challenges are immense.
Let's face it, both sides have suffered heavy losses.
Absolutely.
Russia's lost over 100,000 troops.
Yeah.
Their economy is strained by sanctions.
Right.
Putin's facing internal pressure.
For sure.
Ukraine has lost a similar number of soldiers.
Yeah.
Their economy is in shambles, and they're completely reliant on Western aid.
It's a lose-lose situation.
Yeah.
And the longer it drags on, the worse it gets.
Right.
But that's also why Modi's message is so powerful. He's
Yeah.
essentially saying, look, I know this is hard, but the alternative is continued bloodshed and global instability.
Yeah.
You have to find a way to talk,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've laid out the stakes, right?
Yeah.
We have this devastating war with no end in sight.
Yeah.
This global ripple effect that's, hitting everyone's wallets.
Yeah.
And this bold call for peace from a leader who just might have the clout to pull it off.
Right.
But let's get real. What are the chances that this actually leads to something?
Well, let's game it out.
Okay.
What would even a best-case scenario look like?
Yeah.
Imagine if Modi's message, this, combined with the pressure everyone's feeling, actually nudged Putin and Zelensky towards real talks.
All right, so they're at the table, everyone's tense.
Yeah.
But they're at least talking.
Right.
What would a peace deal that both sides could even stomach look like?
Oh, it would definitely involve some tough compromises.
Okay.
For Ukraine, it might mean accepting the loss of Crimea.
Wow.
which Russia annexed back in 2014.
Yeah.
And maybe even some degree of autonomy for those separatist-controlled areas in the Donbass.
Man, that's a lot to ask.
Yeah.
Especially after everything Ukraine's fought for.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
But any negotiation means giving something up. The question is peace worth that price? Now, on Russia's side, Putin would have to drop this dream of regime change in Kyiv and pull his troops out of the rest of Ukraine.
Has he given any indication that he's willing to do that, though?
Well,
it seems like he's all in on this war.
True, but remember those crippling sanctions from the West?
Yeah.
They're really squeezing Russia's economy.
Right.
And if the military keeps hitting these roadblocks, support for the war inside Russia could start to crumble.
Okay.
Putin might be forced to reconsider.
So you're saying like a mix of economic pain, military stalemate, public pressure could make Putin think, maybe a deal isn't so bad after all.
It's not impossible. The key is making it clear that continuing this war will only hurt Russia more while also offering a way out that, saves face.
All right, but let's be honest. There's a good chance that Putin won't play ball. What if he just digs in, ignores Modi, and ramps up the fighting even more?
Yeah.
What does that world look like?
Well, then we head into much darker territory. If diplomacy fails, we're looking at a protracted war of attrition.
Okay.
Both sides bleed each other dry.
Right.
Neither can win outright, and the whole thing just drags on.
Yeah.
And that's where things get really scary.
Because the longer it goes, the more likely it is that, some miscalculation or accident could escalate things.
Yeah.
Suddenly, NATO and Russia are staring each other down.
Exactly.
And nobody wants that.
It becomes a game of chicken with the highest possible stakes.
Right.
And all the while, Ukraine is the one paying the price.
Yeah.
Their country is being torn apart. Their economy's in ruins. Their people are scattered.
It's heartbreaking. And even if we avoid a wider war, this new Cold War scenario you mentioned earlier sounds pretty grim.
Yeah.
Russia isolated the global economy, fractured the constant fear of nuclear war.
It's a bleak picture.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet. There are still choices to be made.
Okay.
Both by Russia and Ukraine and by the international community. The path we choose now will determine whether we end up in that nightmare scenario or find a way out.
So Modi's call for peace.
Yeah.
It's a long shot, but it's at least a flicker of hope in all this darkness.
Right. He's reminding everyone that there is no military solution here.
Yeah.
The only way out is through dialogue, however difficult that might be.
And it shows how crucial global leaders like Modi are right now.
Yeah.
They can be the bridge builders. The ones who can get these guys talking.
Exactly.
And maybe prevent a total catastrophe.
His choice to speak directly to a global audience on a platform like the Lex Fridman Podcast also shows this, savvy understanding of the changing landscape of influence.
Yeah.
He's not just relying on traditional diplomacy. Yeah. He's going directly to the people, making his case on a platform that resonates with younger generations.
It's a reminder that even in this age of social media and instant communication, the power of words, especially from someone like Modi, can't be underestimated.
Well, world's at a crossroads.
Yep.
And the decisions we make in the coming months and years will determine what kind of future we inherit. Right. A future of endless war and division, or a future where peace and diplomacy prevail.
Well, those are some weighty questions to ponder.
Yeah.
But before we spiral into existential dread, let's unpack the geopolitical fallout of this whole mess. Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about, the immediate crisis and the potential outcomes and the human cost of this war.
Yeah.
But let's zoom out even further.
Okay.
What does the Russia-Ukraine conflict mean for the big picture?
Yeah.
For the way global power works in the 21st century?
This war has been like this seismic shock to the international system. All these assumptions that we had, about global order, they're being tested in a way that we haven't seen in decades.
It's funny. We talk about the rules-based international order all the time.
Yeah.
But this conflict has shown just how easily those rules can be tossed aside.
Right.
When a powerful country decides they just don't apply.
Yeah. Exactly. The invasion of Ukraine is, a blatant violation of international law.
Yep.
It's a direct challenge to the whole idea of sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Right.
These are the very principles that have been the bedrock of global stability since World War II.
And it's not just the invasion itself. It's the whole narrative coming out of Moscow.
Yeah.
This talk about, spheres of influence.
Yeah.
The denial of Ukrainian identity.
Yeah.
it all feels like this dangerous throwback to a much darker time.
It's like they're trying to rewrite the rule book, to create a world where might makes right.
Right.
And powerful nations can just bully their weaker neighbors. It's a vision of the future that's pretty terrifying.
So is this the beginning of a new Cold War then?
Oh.
A world divided into these hostile camps?
Yeah.
Constant tension? The looming threat of conflict?
It's certainly a possibility.
Yeah.
The West and Russia, they're already drawing battle lines. We've got these unprecedented economic sanctions on Russia.
NATO's beefing up its forces in Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
And the rhetoric on both sides is getting more heated by the day.
And on the flip side, Russia's cozying up to China,
Right.
looking for, new economic partnerships, trying to position itself as like the leader of some kind of anti-Western bloc.
The world is definitely becoming more polarized.
Yeah.
And the risk of some kind of miscalculation or escalation is growing.
Right.
And the really scary part is the specter of nuclear war, which we thought was relegated to, history books, is suddenly back on the table.
It's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
But is this new Cold War inevitable? I mean, are there other ways this could play out?
Yeah.
Could this crisis actually, in some strange way, make the international order stronger?
It's not impossible.
Okay.
One scenario is that this whole experience could actually galvanize the international community. Okay. We've seen this remarkable unity among Western nations in their condemnation of Russia and their support for Ukraine. It has surprised a lot of people, hasn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
There were doubts about whether NATO could hold together.
Right.
Especially given the economic hit that everyone's taking.
But the response has been much stronger and more united than many expected.
Yeah.
This could be an opportunity to rebuild and reinforce international institutions, strengthen alliances, and reaffirm the importance of a rules-based system.
But that requires a sustained commitment, right?
Absolutely.
Everyone has to be willing to play by the rules, even when it's tough or costly.
Yeah, exactly. And it also means finding ways to engage with Russia.
Right.
Not to condone what they've done,
Yeah.
but to prevent things from spiraling even further out of control and to lay the groundwork for a more stable future.
That's going to be a tricky balancing act.
Yeah.
But it's crucial if we want to avoid sleepwalking into another global conflict.
Another possibility is that this war accelerates a shift that was already happening.
Okay.
A move away from a world dominated by the United States towards a more multipolar system.
So instead of like one superpower calling all the shots,
Yeah.
you're talking about a world with multiple centers of power.
Right.
China, India, others rising up,
Yeah.
playing a bigger role.
Exactly. The war in Ukraine has shown the limits of American power, both in terms of deterring aggression and in terms of its willingness to get directly involved in conflicts that don't directly threaten its interests.
And that creates an opening for other players to step up,
Right.
pursue their own agendas,
Yeah.
and reshape the global landscape in ways that we can't fully predict.
We're still in the early stages of this multipolar world, and it's not clear yet whether it will be more stable or more chaotic than the old order. But one thing is for sure, things are changing, and the old rules may no longer apply.
It's a time of massive uncertainty and transition.
Yeah.
The geopolitical tectonic plates are shifting.
Right.
The future is up in the air. And it's a bit unnerving, frankly.
It's definitely a wake-up call. This conflict has shown that peace and stability are not a given.
Right.
They're fragile and can be shattered in an instant. We can't take them for granted.
So after all this deep diving, what's the key takeaway for our listeners?
Yeah.
What's the message you want them to walk away with?
We are at a crossroads. The choices that we make now will determine the kind of world we live in. Not just for us, but for generations to come.
Right.
We can choose confrontation and division, which leads down this path of conflict and instability.
Yeah.
Or we can choose diplomacy and cooperation, as hard as that may be, and work towards a more just sustainable and peaceful future.
Powerful stuff. It's easy to feel helpless in the face of all this.
Yeah.
But you're right, we all have a role to play in shaping the future.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep asking the tough questions.
For sure.
The world needs you now more than ever.